Hello there, everyone, and welcome back into Tech Republic. Thank you for joining us on today's webcast. You see the title there, Hamilton Beach, migrating from Lotus Notes. What do they migrate to? They went to Google Apps, and really what we have on tap today is a great living, breathing case study about how that migration went, and so we're going to be diving into that in just a couple of minutes here. I do want to make a couple of reminders to you about our player. One of the best functions you can use is that ask a question box, lower portion of the player. That's where you get to ask questions and comments, and especially on events like today where we have a case study with us, really encourage you to get those questions in early and often, and we're going to answer as many of your questions as we can. For a better view of some of the content, make sure you click that Enlarge Slides button. Have your pop-up blocker turned off, but that'll give you a better view of some of the slides and content that we'll be going over today. Joining me for the conversation, we have Serena Sadia-Sai. She is a product marketing manager with Google, no stranger to Tech Republic. Serena, welcome back.
Thank you.
And our featured guest today is Louis Gary, and you see on the screen here that Louis has been an early adopter of a lot of technologies, and he's had a good feel for certain migrations. He's already done a major migration from CC Mail up to Lotus Notes. That was about 9 years ago, kind of to the day, so it'll be interesting to hear how the migration went from Lotus Notes over to Google Apps and see if there were any comparisons between the two experiences. So, Louis, really do appreciate you joining us today and being on board for the webcast.
I'm glad to be here.
And again, Louis does manage the client services team there at Hamilton Beach. We'll get into a little more detail in a moment here about Hamilton Beach, their environment, and really what they were facing. What we're going to do is start off with Serena, very brief overview kind of what Google Apps is. For those of you that aren't familiar, we'll tell you really what Louis migrated, obviously from Lotus Notes, but what this Google Apps is that he migrated to. And then we'll get into the bulk of the conversation is hearing that migration story. And then we'll open it up to your questions. So, Serena, with that, I want to turn things over to you for a quick overview of Google Apps.
Thanks so much, James. Most of you folks who are on the line today, welcome, and thank you for joining us. You've probably heard about Google Apps, and I just wanted to give a little bit of context before I hand it over to Louis on the solutions that Google provides for IT. We are part of a group called Google Enterprise, which has 4 product lines. Many of you may already be familiar with the Google Search Appliance, which is an appliance that you can install behind your firewall to search a variety of content repositories, your corporate internet, etc. And of course, it leverages the search capabilities that anyone can access from google.com. We also offer a Maps and Earth product line, which are Google Maps and Google Earth for the enterprise. They allow you to do a lot more with your own data, and of course provide support functionality beyond what you might see in the consumer versions. Our Postini products include anti-spam and antivirus filtering, as well as archiving and discovery, in addition to web security and encryption capabilities. Some of that functionality you will actually find in Google Apps, Premier Edition, and that's what I'll talk about next. Just one last thing, though. We have over 1 million businesses who have signed up for Google Apps, and we have thousands of companies around the world signing up for Google Apps daily. So we're very excited to have you here today. We hope that we can answer all of your questions. Google Apps Premier Edition is a suite of messaging and collaboration apps. It includes Gmail for your domain. It also includes integrated chat or instant messaging functionality, as well, of course, a calendaring functionality. Our collaboration apps include Google Docs, which are online versions of word processing, presentation, and spreadsheet software, in addition to Google Sites, which is basically an easy-to-use web publishing app. It's somewhere between a wiki, for example, and a more development-oriented collaboration platform. And we also provide Google Video for Business, which is functionality that you can use basically to have your own YouTube for your domain. And as I mentioned, Google Apps Premier Edition also includes functionality from Postini. There's an additional level of message filtering for both inbound to protect you against spam and virus, but there's also an outbound capability. So if you need to do any content monitoring and filtering to prevent data leakage, for example, or for compliance reasons, you can do so. And we also have made a recent addition to this functionality and included policy enforced TLS, which would enable you to secure transmissions from between two domains. All of these applications, of course, are offered software as a service on a platform that is available to you with a 99.9% uptime guarantee. We provide support 365, 24 days a year, 24/7 days a year. Within Gmail, each user inbox gets 25 gigabytes of storage. And of course, there's mobile options, integration APIs that are available as well to you. All of this, again, as I said, is provided to you software as a service so that you are not responsible for hardware or upgrades or software. All of that is provided to you by Google. And with that context, let me hand it over to Louis, who will tell you very much about his experience, his singular customer experience in moving from Lotus Notes Domino to Google Apps.
Thank you, Serena. As Serena said, I am the Manager of Client Services at Hamilton Beach Brands. Hamilton Beach is a manufacturer, a leading designer, marketer, and distributor of small household kitchen appliances. We have several brands that you're familiar with: Hamilton Beach, Proctor Silex, Eclectrics, True Air, Traditions. We're a 100-year-old company that was founded by engineers that were focusing on motorized appliances and heating appliances, and our history is varied. At one point, I know during my tenure here, we were manufacturing more coffee makers than anyone on the planet, which was pretty impressive. The project team that addressed Google Apps was not just me and my project team or my team at Hamilton Beach. We have three teams. I wanted to illustrate that briefly. The client services team is one of three teams, and we mainly focus on desktop support and applications such as email. The infrastructure, compliance, and security team actually did the most of the analysis going into the Google Apps, and we'll talk about that later. And they also support infrastructure, servers, etc. Our business solutions team was involved in the project as well, providing some application development for interfaces, syncing Lotus Notes data with the Google Apps environment. So we had an integrated approach that pretty much touched all of our Hamilton Beach IS department. The situation that we were faced with last year was looking at where we were going with Lotus Notes. Lotus Notes had been working very successfully for us for a number of years, but due to the complexity of how we use it, and some of that is we use databases and a lot of database workflow, that whenever there's an upgrade, we have to go through a process of testing all of the new features and functions of the new versions against all of our databases in addition to email. So that complexity has limited us to upgrading only every 4 or 5 years. So we were facing an upgrade requirement that a current version we were on is going to be end of support. So we had to do something. Under maintenance, our software cost was going to be covered, but we have additional costs that are involved with support of email. Some of those costs include servers, backup systems, etc. We also have a separate system that we brought in that synced Lotus Notes to our wireless phones, which adds complexity to the environment we had with Lotus. And then we also have a global access requirement that was continuing to grow as we expand our business. And we use Citrix and VPN technologies to allow access to employees into our systems. The solutions that we were looking at when faced with that situation included upgrading to the latest Lotus platform, and that had been our plan for a long period of time, and we were evaluating the next version with anticipation and looking forward to the new features of the new Lotus platform. And we also considered looking to another server-based platform as an alternative, and what would that involve. And we finally were looking at a hosted model. The reasons behind these were that to upgrade a Lotus was going to require software upgrades. It was going to continue to require maintenance and training of the employees on the new client environment that we were going take advantage of with the new Lotus environment. One of the drawbacks was we were going to be facing downtime during the upgrade to go through the process of upgrading our servers and databases. And switching to another server-based platform, we found a lot of the same issues were going to be involved as if we were going to upgrade and stay with Lotus. We would have to convert, maintain, and train. We still would have to do all of those processes. And when we started looking at a hosted model, we saw that it would ultimately be a lower cost to convert, a lower cost to maintain, and we also felt it would be a lower cost to train. And that led us to looking at Google Apps.
Louis, as we look in here at Google Apps and some things that were appealing to you, did you have any individual champions, some people that really want to go to the latest version of Lotus Notes, or was there some, after evaluating some of the options, did you get to kind of more of a unanimous, let's look a bit deeper here at Google Apps?
We probably had a very, what you'd call a full-throated debate within our department for about 3 to 6 months as we started exploring, as the exploration evolved to include more and more of our IS department, with more input, we did have dissenters. We had people that saw Lotus and the platforms we were running on as the best, and still some of them consider that it still is even better than Google for the reasons that they find important. As a whole in the department, though, we found that doing feature comparisons and analysis of what Lotus has and what Lotus was offering in the new release, what Google has, what Google has done over the last year to expand, we came to a conclusion as a department, maybe not a unanimous one, but a consensus that it made sense to move forward and dig deeper into Google Apps. I mean, a lot of this was preliminary, looking at did it even make sense to take it to the next step.
And it seems like, though, that type of spirited debate and really evaluating, that's something that you would really advise folks to have so that you do get all the stakeholders to the table and really, hash things out, find out exactly what is important to all the parties and really have a good, thorough vetting of the solutions out there.
Exactly. It didn't just stay within the IS department. Our analysis before we made the final decision to move in this direction included our legal department was included in evaluating Google as from security, from a standpoint of privacy, from the standpoint of intellectual property issues that our law department would have for protecting our company assets. They were involved in evaluation of it. My team specifically likes to represent our employee base, and we understand how the employees come in day to day and turn on their computer and log into email, log into their applications, and what they want out of that experience. And we brought to the table representing the employee view of it, whereas other teams in the IS department were looking at it from what does it take to support a system? What is the cost for a system? What do I need how many people do I need? How many resources do I need to support a system? So we came at it from a lot of different directions, and ultimately analyzed features that were lost by going to Google Apps, features that were gained by going to Google Apps, and we evaluated the systems and security, and ultimately we identified significant savings. And probably that one area was a tipping point when we were actually surprised, and we had a cost-benefit analysis, and we probably went over that with a fine-tooth comb 2, 3, or 4 times, consistently trying to be as conservative with our estimates as possible, and we're still came up with that we were going to ultimately save money, which in these times, unfortunately, is a significant issue.
Absolutely. Let's do this. We're getting a lot of great questions in here. Louis from Chuck, Ed, Doug out there, Mary as well, Michael and Ross. And lots of great questions coming in here. So let's do this. Let's continue on forward. Obviously, you did that internal vetting process, had the great conversations. You settled on, focusing on Google Apps. So let's continue on forward here.
Okay. What we wound up doing is we made an internal proposal to our executive team, and in that proposal we provided the cost-benefit analysis. We also provided the results of a survey that we took on employees to ask them. We didn't tell them we were looking at Google. We didn't tell them we were looking at upgrading email. We just said we've got to make a decision about our email system. And we asked them a lot of different questions about the use and function of different aspects of email, what was the deal breaker, what was important, what is a nice to have. And what we got from surveying our employees was that email is important, but it didn't matter exactly which email platform, so there was no inherent wedding or marriage to Lotus Notes or any specific platform. They just wanted as many of the features and functions that helped them with their job as possible. And that seemed to jive with the feature comparisons that we got in comparing Lotus Notes with Google. So we presented the case to management, and I remember sitting in that meeting, and the light bulbs went on when we finally convinced the management that doing nothing, staying with Lotus Notes without an upgrade, was going to cost more than moving to Google Apps. That if we did nothing, we would lose money. So we had to do something, and there was a cost associated with doing something, but ultimately moving to Google Apps was going to be less expensive than doing nothing, and that's when the light bulbs went on. So what at the time we eventually proposed was a phased migration, and because understanding our employees, we felt that we needed to move data from Lotus to Google so that the employees would be happy with the environment in Google. And we recognized that there were some additional products from Google that we needed. We needed the Google Apps Premier Edition, and we have a 3-year retention policy in our email, so we purchased the additional retention feature. We also have a need for archiving and doing federated searches across archives, and so we bought the Postini Message Security, Archive and Discovery packages, as well as the Google Archive Ingestion, so that we can move data from our Lotus Notes into the searchable archive. We have been using another third-party service for scanning for spam and viruses before it hit our Lotus Notes mail system, so that was something that came with Google, but we bought a slightly higher service level from the Postini Message Security.
Gary, as we move forward here and look at some of the migration project itself in a little more detail here, I want to go back to kind of the introduction. And I mentioned that about 9 years ago you went from CC Mail up to Lotus Notes. So you've already done a major email migration. When all of a sudden you realized that this was going to be another one of those major email migrations, what went through your mind?
I think it was my stomach that went through my mind when it was the project was evaluated, planned, and as a department, but it was led by a different group in our department. But it was determined that the best place, because of the nature of Google Apps, for the project implementation would be with my team. So at the moment that became true, and I didn't fight it because it makes sense, but I just realized I had this big project in front of me that looked like a huge, I don't know, I guess you call it the 800-pound elephant, and I was trying to swallow it in one bite, but you know, that doesn't work. So at the time I got the project, I'm looking out, this is in late November, early December, I'm thinking, how is this going to happen? How are we going to do this? But in working with Google and the other parties that helped us with the project, by about February, I felt a lot better with our initial the initial expectations. Our initial expectation was we were going to have everything migrated by the end of June. And after we got through our planning with Google and with the 2 other vendors that we worked with, Binary Tree and Apereo, I felt much better in February that we were actually going to meet an end of April commitment or an unofficial commitment to finish the migration. And we pretty much did that. We were 100% migrated by May 1st with a couple of accounts that had to have some reprocessing done on them.
Gotcha. And again, this is a very fresh migration, so I really encourage folks, if you have questions for Louis about how the migration went, any specific issues, ideas that he had to deal with, definitely submit those questions to us. We're getting a lot of great questions here. So, Louis, as we move forward now, let's dive into a couple of these specifics and what really the project looked like while you did the migration.
Well, the early stages, we obviously negotiated with Google on the terms and conditions. We got our legal and compliance teams involved and resolved those fairly smoothly. We reviewed migration approaches. There's 2 big approaches. Big bang. You come in, you leave work Friday, and you come in Monday morning, and everybody's in Google, or a migration process. And we chose, based on knowing our our company's environment that we could not do a big bang and that we wanted to do a migration. So that one decision is probably one of the key decisions you have to make at the very beginning to understand what the scope of your project is going to be. Once you decide on a migration, you've got some issues that led us to you working with third-party firms. One of the issues is how do you coexist between Lotus and Gmail? How do you coexist between the calendars in Lotus and the calendars in Gmail? How do you get the data over so that it can be readable in Gmail, and how do you get folders working with labels? Those are the types of questions that were going through my mind when I got this project. What Google did for us is they assigned a project migration engineer, migration manager, who worked with us to find some other resources, and the other resources included Aperio, which helped us with FreeBusy calendar visibility across the two systems, as well as training and API support with our developers, and Binary Tree, who is an expert in data migration, and they worked with us. We worked with them on migrating the mail and calendar and contacts from Lotus to the Google environment. We came up with a plan that included pilot groups. The pilot groups were going to help us evaluate what is our real training needs, how much of the training in Google is really needed for how many people. I mean, some people don't need the training and don't want it, and a lot of people need more than you can give, and we had to get an idea of what kind of training was going to be needed. So we had pilot groups where we kind of threw an IS department pilot group in without training and then asked them how bad it was. And then we threw another group in which was representative of the business departments and gave them a little bit of training, or at least our beta version of training, and then asked them how that was. And eventually came up with more of a phased migration approach. Came up with a communication plan. We tried to establish the order of migration between do we migrate mail first and archives, or archives first and mail. We started the first two pilots doing mail first and then archives, and then realized that really didn't work, and so we threw an additional pilot group in and reversed the whole order and did archives first and then the mail files, and that seemed to work a lot better. One of the questions early on was how fast can we migrate? We did not know. I mean, there was some data speeds. You think about internet speeds and how fast can you push data. One of the things we ran into was learning that Google has a throttle. You can only add 1 document per second per connection into the Google Apps environment. So you can go as fast as you have PCs that can push the data. We wound up having 12 PCs pushing data simultaneously, and we're able to effectively move the data fast enough. Then we wanted to, let me switch to the next slide. We decided to have as extensive a communication plan as we could. We came up early on before we started any migrations, and we created some weekly FAQ emails to prepare employees not only with what are they going to be getting in Google and comparing it to Lotus Notes, what are they going to get in Google that they don't have in Lotus Notes, and then we actually put out some emails to warn people, here's what you're not going to get in Google that is in Lotus Notes, and we'll keep asking Google for that feature. But there's some things that it's not 100%. So we included that in our emails. As I said, we discussed planned a phased migration, and that encompassed 4 pilot groups, 4 remote locations that migrated as a complete location. We split up our headquarters group into 9 migration groups. And then we had to deal with the faceless accounts, what you might call a service account that's handled by multiple people for a department or customer service. We had to work through when we were going to migrate those. And I'll just say as an aside, I have not gotten a better recommendation or a better high five, if you will, than I had from the manager of our customer service operation and how they process emails going through the Google Apps that they were getting from our website, from our consumers. They are much more efficient now with Google than they were on Lotus Notes, and I'm not sure I can explain why, but that's what they're telling me. They're ecstatic with Google. We ultimately moved 500 accounts in all of these different types of groupings. We decided early on to maintain Lotus Notes as our source of truth. We're still going to have Lotus Notes databases. So we're still going to create accounts in Lotus Notes, so I didn't want to have to duplicate all of the steps of creating a user in all the different systems. So we were using Google's directory sync service so that we create a user in Lotus Notes and use the directory sync service to provision that user in Google. We're also using, or still working on developing a automated process to sync contacts, which is the user and group names, into the Google Apps environment. This is one of the things that Google has not yet fixed, in that the DSS service, it provisions users and it provisions groups, but it doesn't provision those names as a contact yet, so that when you're composing an email, the auto-completion process picks up the names of those groups and users for use in the email. So we right now have to use a manual, a self-made process using the Google APIs to sync that up, but Google has told me they're working on that. Basically, that's the auto-completion process that, and when you're composing an email. The additional resources, as I mentioned, Google provided a general project support, and I wanted to take this time to give a shout out to Sanjit Arora, who was a great help on this project. He basically probably was wondering when I was going to stop calling him, but he called me too to keep tabs on the project, and he helped bring resources at Google to bear when we had some questions or problems that came up with the migration or understanding how this was going. They also brought Binary Tree and Apereo in. Binary Tree was the heavy lifter for the migration of the data, and this is a little shout out to Travis Robinson, who was the engineer with Binary Tree, on working with us. And I'm not sure that Binary Tree wants to know exactly how many hours he spent on this project with us, but he was there late hours, late at night, when we were trying to migrate early on, and we were still we had a little bit of problems, as anybody would, just trying to make sure we got our system straight. But at the end there, our migrations were moving very smoothly. And then Apereo, Mark Hanko, Brad Stark, they worked with us on getting the free Busy tool to work, as well as training my trainer so that we ran our internal training classes. And they also provided some training to our developers to learn the APIs that Google has out there so we could build the synchronization processes. I'd like to share some of the key success factors that I think led to this project going as smoothly as it did. If you remember, originally we said we were going to have a June 30th expected completion date. Then we moved that up, and we thought we could get it done by April 30th. And there were times during the March and early April that I didn't think that was going to happen, but we actually did that. And I think one of the keys was my being able to dedicate a lot of my time, maybe 110% of my time during this time period, to the project. So anybody doing this project, I recommend you get somebody who this is going to be a full-time commitment to them during the course of the migration. It can't be a part-time problem, at least in our small, our small to mid-sized business environment. We're a 500-employee company, roughly. We run a lean environment in terms of support. We can't afford to have people splitting their time on this project and their other days, their other duties. So I believe that was one of the key success factors, being able to work with my partners, as well as provide the attention to all the details. There were a lot of moving parts, as my boss said, on this project, and to keep them all moving in the right direction takes a lot of attention. Communication, you can't shortchange communication, although some of the people in my office might have wished I had shortchanged the communication a bit. We had to communicate about migration groups. We had to communicate about migration phases. We had to communicate about the post-review cleanup processes that are invariably have to be done. I don't think you can communicate enough, though. I think some people probably think you can. I don't think you can. One of the key success factors was that we got initial early buy-in by our upper-level executive management. it wasn't just the issue of that it was going to save the company money. It was the recognition that this was solving a number of other business problems that we had identified over the years of working, not just because it was Lotus, but in general in email. With hosting your own email system, there was a lot of support, a lot of resources that came to bear to do it yourself. Another key success factor was to minimize the change impact. Mainly that was by communication, but also by decisions we made on how we were going to migrate, what we were going to migrate, and how we were going to provide training and the opportunities for additional learning. Constant communications with frequently asked question emails. We had a couple of open forum meetings where we would let all employees who had migrated to Google come sit in our conference room, share their questions with others, let people who knew the answers share them. If it wasn't always from the IS department, some people learn Google and how to use some of the features faster than my own team did. One of the key success factors, I think, is to quickly address complaints and comments and take them all seriously, even if you can't solve the problem or resolve the complaint, at least to address them and keep the line of communication open. Especially if somebody takes the trouble to communicate with you, that's important to communicate back. There were occasions where I heard of people that did not communicate directly with me. They may have had problems, but you can't fix what you don't know. So those that do complain, it's because they care about what their work environment is, and we took that seriously. And we continue to get support from the management chain in addition to the early buy-in. So those were some of the key success factors. Some of the lessons learned, well, I will go back to the earliest decision we made after we decided to move forward was, is it Big Bang or is it migration? I still might toss a coin today to say I don't know which one is better. I know our environment was such that we felt the need to migrate rather than to do a Big Bang. It allows us to move off of Lotus Notes. It allows us to mothball or decommission servers and systems and data and stop backups. Whereas if we had done a Big Bang, we still would have had searching requirements and access requirements to the old data. So that was a decision we made that made sense for our environment, and it's a key one that you'll make in your environment. Again, as I said, it's a very complex project with many moving parts, especially if you choose the migration. You cannot communicate too much, but people will think you did. But it is, you got to have a thick skin about that, and I think my team does, and I appreciate that. One of the key lessons learned, if anybody's wondering what is the impact to the employee, almost routinely when I talk to our employees after the fact, it was about a 1-week learning curve or mourning period, a combined 1-week period where after they got migrated to Google, they pretty much had gotten past, this is not Lotus Notes, oh, this is different, I understand how to do it now, hey, this is kind of neat, now I see some things I can do that are different and it'll help me. So almost routinely it was 1 week with just about anybody I asked. Now, what were the results? Well, going into the project, we estimated that we were going to save 60% of the operating cost and support costs for our email system. And we've already started to put that together and actually realize it as we're canceling some of the ancillary services. So we're expecting that we will save a 60% level of what it has been costing to have an email system. One of the things that we have now that we could not provide without further cost is anytime, anywhere access. With Lotus Notes, we were making available to all of our employees that needed it or requested it a way to get to our system either through the web, through Citrix, through VPN, laptops. But we also had times where we had to bring our systems down, and we had to bring them down for doing system maintenance or system backups. Those downtimes and those limited ways of getting to our email system are now gone because on Google Apps, if you have a computer anywhere that can get to the Internet, you can get to your email system. An interesting side story on this is we migrated our Mexico office about a week before the swine flu virus kicked in, and our Mexico City office employees all of a sudden had to work from home. We don't give every single employee remote access to email in Lotus Notes, but they have it in Google. So every employee that had to work from home did not lose any touch with their email because they had already migrated to Google. And that was a very, very fortuitous timing, but that's one of the benefits. Uptime. I mentioned before that our systems come down on a monthly basis, including our mail systems, for maintenance and backups so that we get a clean backup for disaster recovery. We don't have to worry about that, so now that we're on Google Apps. So the uptime issue is not a problem for our employees. Notwithstanding the reported little downtime issues that have come up periodically, and we had one, about a week or so ago that did affect us. It didn't affect our whole company, but it did affect some of our offices, including our corporate headquarters. In the past, though, because of all of our mail flowed through our corporate mail system, when our corporate mail system would go down, everybody would be down. So I guess looking at it in the glass half full basis, the outage that we experienced with Google recently, some of our offices, especially those in Mexico and Canada and China, were not infected at all. So part of our operations were not affected by that inadvertent downtime. Wireless synchronization. We used to use a third-party solution that was Good Mobile Messaging, and it was a very good solution, but it required a Domino server in my environment to sync email from Domino to the Good Mobile Messaging environment back to the handhelds. That now is a much more simpler environment where the BlackBerry applet syncs directly with Google Apps, and it uses the same credentials as the user, and then there's no server or system in my office to maintain. There's one small applet to maintain on the BlackBerry. So it's a much simpler, much more efficient and less costly solution than what we had before to support Lotus. The interesting thing to me is I manage an outsourced help desk, and I was worried that during the migration we would see a spike of calls that would exceed my contracted call level, and that did not happen. I'd like to think it wasn't because everybody called me and I didn't log the calls, but I believe that in reality the number of calls about email is going to go down, and what seems to be happening now is the majority of the calls are limited to Firefox, which is the standard we've chosen for the browser environment to give us as much of a feel that we can make look like Lotus Notes with the nested folders. We've chosen Firefox, so what we're doing is learning that there's some health issues with Firefox that we probably didn't know about before, or we're just getting through. Those are the kinds of calls we're getting now. But our call volume did not balloon during the migration, which was a surprise to me. What were the results for our employees? Well, most of our employees are happy, and by most I mean a significant majority. There are features and functions that people are still asking for, and we're submitting them to Google to get enhancement requests in. But most everybody that I've talked to is happy. I don't think I've talked to maybe but one person, if I can even think of that person, who is very upset and would want to go back to Lotus Notes in a second. I believe most employees appreciated the effort behind the migration, and there was an effort on the part of a lot of people, and they appreciated the process, even when the process may not have been as smooth or may not have been successful for their particular migration, and that did occur occasionally. Our customer service group, as I mentioned earlier, is extremely pleased with it. One of the nice things is language support. Lotus Notes, as well as Windows, the platform that we have on our desktop PCs, supports Chinese and Spanish to some degree, but the entire environment isn't integrated. You're relying on Windows for part of it and Lotus for part of it, and in Google we have our folks in China and our folks in Mexico can turn on the language that they want to see, and they're very much happier, more efficient in those languages. And one thing that I hadn't thought about before we started the project to begin with, but I realized going through, is we never shut down our mail system. We didn't have to shut down anybody's mail during the course of the migration. Even when they were migrating, they were able to work in Lotus while we migrated them to Google, and then the next day we said, all right, don't work in Lotus anymore. So that was a benefit that we didn't have to have any downtime. And I guess that must be the end of what I was planning to talk about.
It is, Louis, and really a lot of great insights there. I think we all got a good feel for what you went through. Guess what your presentation generated? 104 questions so far, and that is continuing to grow. We're not going to get to all of those. What we will do, Gary, we're going to jump on over again. Serena Sadia-Sai, Product Marketing Manager with Google, is with us. We're going to take a few minutes with her right now. Then we'll dive into the questions that we don't get to on this event. We will be forwarding on to Serena and to Louis and his team, and we'll try and get some email responses back out to answer these questions. So, Serena, let me get you back in here. Again, turn it over to you for a couple minutes, and then we'll dive into the questions from our audience.
Thanks, James and Louis. That was terrific. I've been looking at the questions, and I will try to answer some of them that have come up that are more Google Apps specific in the next couple of slides. Security. This is always something that people ask because as you move to a cloud-based service, people are always interested in understanding how does Google's security compare to my own. One question that did come up is, can we actually have Google Apps on our own servers? And no, Google Apps is a cloud-based system. When we provide it as a cloud-based system, though, we think that there are a lot of things that you should know in terms of how we look at security. First, it's about people. Hiring security experts basically on your behalf who are working to ensure your data is protected against hackers and other types of threats. Google has also undergoes an annual SAS 70 Type 2 audit to make sure that the processes that we have put in place are being adhered to by our people and that we meet our own stringent requirements. And then finally, our technology. Our data centers are certainly the key asset to providing you this cloud-based service, and so we want to make sure that they are secure from a physical perspective as well as secure from a technology perspective. When we store, for example, your data on Google servers, we obfuscate the data so that no one can see a single email, for example, on a single server. And a single email's data will be sharded across multiple servers, and it won't really be intelligible. We have a security white paper that has a lot more details around this, and we'd be happy to share that with you, or you can certainly find it on our website. The next thing a lot of people will ask us about, of course, is our customers. We work with a range of customers from the Fortune 500 really to the mom and pop shops around the world. We also have for the EDU or university or K-12 customers on the line, Google Apps Education Edition. We have been talking about Google Apps Premier Edition today. Google Apps Education Edition is also available to folks. We have migrated many customers from as large as Genentech, 12,000 employees, to Google Apps, and we've also worked with 5-person companies as well, and everyone in between, of course, including Hamilton. Most folks have experience with Google before Google Apps. Perhaps you're using AdWords, or you're using Maps, or you're using Search, or Google Search on Google.com. And if you are, one of the things that you will note in using any of those products is that we believe in a few simple things. One is that simple is better than complex. We're always working to make things as simple and easy for you to use. And as Louis was going through his presentation, he noted that there were some tools or features that he was hoping that we would build in. We always listen to our customers, and since we're in a SaaS environment, we can rapidly iterate. But we do hope to address most of Louis's future requests as quickly as possible. We do always want to make sure that the experience for you and your employees is fast, and so we're always focused on ensuring that latency is reduced and performance of all of our apps is as fast as it can be. And finally, we want to make your employees happy and really actually enjoy the experience. So it's not just about making these products useful, but it's also about making something that's fun to use as well. We work, because our Google Apps are also offered in consumer versions, we work across hundreds of millions of users who are basically helping test out the apps before we bring them over into the business world. Finally, one of the things to note is that the Google Apps that you see today is by no means the Google Apps that you will see a year from now. In 2008 alone, we released 68 major features, which included things like video chat, Google Sites, Google Video for Business, and we hope to continue this rapid pace of innovation as well. I want to send it back now to Louis for any questions, but certainly if anyone is interested, I would encourage you to sign up for a free 30-day trial. The best way to understand how Google Apps might work in your environment is really just to try it out yourself. We're not going to send our salespeople to call you, so please, if you are interested in finding more about Google Apps, go to our website at www.google.com/A and reach out to us.
And Serena, we've made that link available on the related resources area of the player as well. And if folks click on the Google logo on our player today, they can get over there as well for more information about Google Apps. So let's do this. I do want to dive into a bunch of questions. We're up to like 140 now. So again, a lot of these questions will be answered after the event. But Louis, want to get over to Saqib and wanting to know about your training program for the users. Can you describe what you did? I know you talked about some email sends and things like that, but was there any other formal training that was set up for your users?
We had a training class that was developed by Kim Collins and my team, and she created a class with some assistance from Google Resources and Aperio Resources that was focused on the two key areas, mail and calendar. I believe it was about an hour-and-a-half class that spent about an hour on the mail functionality and about 30 minutes on calendar. And I know she went, filled up the time, and there probably could have been a 2-hour class or could have been longer. But in trying to be as efficient as possible with the timing, what we were trying to do, trying to achieve, as well as recognizing that we were trying to fit one class for everybody, which we don't always try to do here. We try to tailor it more to individual needs. But so that's what we did, and we had the classes offered before each migration group to each migration group, so we could try to control the pacing and the sign-ups for the classes as best we could. Not everybody went to the classes, but we also have the follow-up forums that we're doing, which are open sessions where people can ask questions now.
Also on the training front, Carol was wondering, did you conduct any type of training for the staff that was going to ultimately be kind of supporting Google Apps?
Actually, we did. We did, as part of our relationship with Aperio, we had them provide a train-the-trainer class, which trained not only my trainer in my department, who is Kim Collins, is one of the hats she wears, but my entire team was trained, as well as my outsourced help desk and technical supervisor was involved in the training, so he got appreciation and he could train his staff for first-level help desk. I think we had a couple other people in the department that sat in on the training, so we actually had them train 6 or 7 people between my company and our outside vendor.
There were a couple of folks, I'm going to pick Darren's question, but a lot of folks were trying to get an idea, Louis, from you. Did you lose any IS people in terms of, say, a Lotus Notes admin or developer that you no longer employ because you moved to a hosted service?
No, we're a very lean shop. And so what we found when we were analyzing what it cost to support our email system was there was about 6 or 7 people who had anywhere from 10 to 15% to 20% of their duties associated with supporting email. So we didn't have one person that was the email support person that lost their job. What we did instead was we've basically been able to have those people's time freed up a bit to work on more what we would think is business critical and valuable projects and endeavors rather than just supporting the email system. So we didn't lose any staff for this.
All right. Hey, Serena, we're getting a couple questions here regarding, like Kevin has one, wants to know, can you view other users' calendars and mailboxes using Google Apps here?
So actually,
I was going to say I can answer to what we're doing. We do have delegated calendars for administrative assistant support in supporting their executive VP or somebody else's calendar. As I understand it, and this is probably maybe Serena will add more, is Google is working on what they call delegated mail files, so that's not available yet.
Right, and then also in terms of the sharing capabilities across all of our Google apps really is that one of the things that we have built in is the ability for you, the end user, to decide how you want to share your calendar. So, for example, the use cases that Louis mentioned are also supported, but some of the additional things that you can do with Google Calendar, in fact, that I do, is I actually will share my free busy details with people outside my domain, so that if I'm working with vendors or consultants, they can actually book meetings with me directly because now they actually can see when I am free. Google Calendar also lets you say, no, actually this event is private. I don't want to share any details of this event with anyone. And it certainly, it basically puts you in control of what information you want to share and with whom.
Excellent. What I want to do right now is real quickly push out a quick survey to the audience. Just gives us some feedback here at Tech Republic about this event that we've shared with you, so we do appreciate your feedback. Pop-up blockers off or hit Control-C. And in 3, 2, 1, blast off. Here comes that survey to you. Appreciate you taking a quick moment to answer some of those questions. While we continue on with questions from you, Carol Lewis wants to get, again, a good timeline. We kind of went over it in a long version today in the presentation, but from beginning to end, from the time you started looking at Google to basically, as you said, May 1st, kind of almost the end of the migration, what was that total time frame?
I think I know that the other team was focusing on the analysis of the email system cost and the Google evaluation, I believe beginning in the summer, early summer of 2008. It might have been a little bit earlier. I'm not exactly sure of the start time. And my team got involved in the detailed analysis probably around September and looking at from the client standpoint, analyzing the interfaces for the client versus Lotus. And then I was conducting the surveys of the users in, I believe it was October, and we made a decision to move forward and got the buy-in from the executives in our late November meeting with the execs, and that's when we were given the green light to move forward. We negotiated the final terms and conditions with Google in December and signed an agreement at the end of December. So as of the very end of December, we were now essentially a Google customer, and from that point forward was the project planning and then the initiation of the migrations. The first migrations started with the first pilot in, I want to say, February with a small IS department pilot, and then another one a week later with, or 2 weeks later with a departmental group across the company. And then the heavy migrations didn't start till, I believe it was the end of March, 1st of April. So most of the migrations in terms of volume took place in just the month of April.
Gotcha. And again, that, as you said earlier, came in a bit earlier than expected. You guys had an original kind of June time frame, and obviously we're before June now, and you're pretty much done there. So, hey, Serena, another question I want to throw your way from David, and I think some other folks have a similar scenario here. He says that they have scanners that send PDFs to email. Wants to know, can those be configured to send to Gmail? Are there any requirements of IP or an SMPT server?
Yeah, absolutely. Google provides APIs, and we also do provide that flexibility to have your scanners email to a scanned copy of PDF, for example, to your email box.
One of the things we're still using internal systems. One of the questions had to do with databases and workflow. The databases that send out workflow with doc links, those emails, when they get to Google, the doc links still work. You click on the doc link. This is something that actually Google developed while we were in the middle of it was one of the things we were concerned about while we were doing our planning, and they released it. So that within the Google API on the web, the doc link will open up the Lotus Notes view or document in the Lotus Notes database that was in the email. What we do is we route all of those databases through our Notes server that we've configured to forward up through the Postini Google into the cloud that way.
A couple questions here, kind of just housekeeping. A few folks have joined us late today and or just want to download some of the slides to review some of the things you went over, Louis. So I'll let folks know that you can click the download slides button to get the PDF. We have recorded today's presentation, so everyone will get a reminder email. If you joined us late, you'll get that reminder email that will bring you back to the on-demand version. I encourage you to click the email friend link on the player. That will let you invite a colleague to register for the event and also come back for that on-demand. One of the last questions I think we'll be wrapping up here, and again, now over 150 questions have come in. We're going to wrap all these up in a report, get them in the hands of Serena and Louis, try and get some email responses back out to you. But Louis, Susan wants to know just kind of about the backup and archiving process. How often do you test that? Satisfied with what's provided there? What can you talk about backup and archiving?
I'm not sure what you mean by backup and archiving. We're not doing any backing up or archiving of the Google environment. If you were talking about what we were doing in Notes, that was we were backing up every day, and we had our Lotus Notes archiving process that moved stuff from the main mail file to the archive mail file, but all that has been migrated to Google. We are using the Postini archive and discovery process, and what that does is every email as it flows through Google, in or out or within Google, it actually is copied out to the Postini archive as a separate data area, so that when we need to have any searches for any kind of reason for searching on specific terms, or if we're looking for information, we can do a federated search into that copy and not be looking at individual mail files. But we aren't doing anything with backing up the Google environment ourselves.
Gotcha. I think it was more towards what had you been doing before and what was saved, obviously, time on your end. Louis, really do want to thank you for taking time, sharing your story today. A lot of good information shared. Again, if there's some specific questions still for you, we'll try and get those in your hands, and if we can get some responses out to the audience, that would be great.
You're welcome.
And Serena, before we go, again, I just want to remind the audience they can get more information over at Google Apps. You can click on the related resources link there. That'll take you over to Google. And anything else people should be looking for while they get over there, Serena?
Yeah, actually, I just want to let people know, since this has been a great informative discussion with Louis about Lotus Notes Domino. Louis did the phase migration approach with Hamilton Beach, and this was very interesting for us to understand what the lessons learned there. We have another customer who also has migrated from Lotus Notes Domino. They actually just recently completed their migration. They were also global, just like Hamilton Beach, but they chose the Big Bang approach. And so if people are interested in hearing about how you might do it the other way, stay tuned, because in a couple of weeks we'll have this other customer come and talk to us about their experiences.
All right, excellent. And again, you'll look for information that will be sent out to folks, and can get more information about that. Again, Serena, appreciate you coming back to Tech Republic, sharing today with us, and I know we'll be talking soon down the road.
Thanks so much.
And again, everyone, we're going to keep the player open for a couple moments so you can continue to download the slides, also click on some of those related resources. Really do want to thank you all for taking time out of your day, joining us for today's presentation. We hope to see you again here at Tech Republic for more of our webcasts. Also appreciate you filling out that survey that we sent out to you all. We hope you all have a great day. Again, my name is James Hilliard, and we will talk to you down the road.